Cliff one more time in the United States. Representatives from both the Republicans and the Democrats have been trying to come up with a government spending plan that they can pass through both houses. They've got a draft that they've agreed between them, $85 billion. It's worth. It'll finance the government until September 2015. It's not a full budget, though. There are many issues like taxation, which have been left out. Oliver Farry has the details.
It has been hailed in Washington as a welcome return to compromise and could save the US from another brush with the fiscal brink. Congressional Republicans and Democrats announced an $85 billion budget deal that will apply until September 2015. The deal will increase spending by $63 billion and reduce the deficit by $23 billion, and both sides had something to be happy about. Republicans can point to there being no new tax cuts, while Democrats have avoided reduction in education spending.
That means to me a budget agreement that reduces the deficit without raising taxes and replaces some of the arbitrary across-the-board spending cuts with smarter, permanent reforms that pay for this relief.
But there were things left out of the deal. Certain tax credits for the rich will not go, there will be no welfare cuts, and the federal debt limit has not been raised, which means the US could still default on debt payments in February. Democrats said they would settle for the progress made for now.
I was disappointed that we weren't able to close even a single corporate tax loophole. I know many Republicans had hoped this would be an opportunity to make some of the kinds of changes to Medicare and Social Security they've advocated for. But Congressman Ryan have set aside our differences.
The budget still has to face Congress, where it is likely to meet opposition from hardline Republicans in the lower house, and it cannot risk alienating minority Democratic representatives.
Now, that deal came too late for Wall Street to see any reaction, but investors in Asia haven't been terribly impressed with that deal agreed on Capitol Hill. They've been taking profits mostly on the trading on the markets today. We've seen the markets plunging into the red across Asia. In fact, the Shanghai Composite down 1.7%, almost in trading. Even in South Korea, where they've posted their lowest jobless rate on record, the Kospi still down almost 0.8%.
In the United States, regulators have approved a rule aimed at stopping banks from taking unnecessary risks.
Yeah, this is part of a wider reform of Wall Street. 5 regulators have now signed off on what's known as the Volcker Rule. Now, essentially, it prevents banks or bans banks from taking risky trading bets with money that's held in their accounts, as well as putting extra responsibility on them to make sure that they don't either encourage or take these unnecessary risks. Now, the idea is to prevent government money having to be used to bail out a bank that gets itself into trouble, but also to avoid a trading scandal like the London Whale, for example, the one we saw that cost JP Morgan $6 billion because of actions taken by a trader. Now, this rule is part of wider Wall Street reforms that were agreed back in 2010, but opposition from the banks has held it up until now. With the regulators passing it, it still won't come into force until July 2015, and there are more legal challenges planned to this rule in the future.
Well, there are similar efforts underway here in Europe to reform the banking sector.
Yeah, it's been gone about a slightly different way. EU finance ministers are trying to agree rules for a new agency which will help to wind up failing banks in the eurozone. Now, it's designed to stop the taxpayer having to bail out struggling lenders the way they did in Ireland or in Spain. Now, the draft they're working on includes a new agency which will wind up failing eurozone banks. It will use a single rescue fund that's to be created over 10 years with money raised from a levy on banks. Now, there wasn't any final agreement in Brussels at that meeting on Tuesday. They'll gather again next week to try to hash out those final details.
All right, well, take us through some of the day's company news.
OK, we're going to start with General Motors, which says that it will stop car production in Australia by 2017 with the loss of almost 3,000 jobs. The company says it's because of high costs and increasing competition there. The decision by GM, though, will hit the rest of Australia's car industry hard, with unions claiming that up to 50,000 jobs are being put at risk. A cost-cutting plan presented to unions at Alitalia could see up to 1,900 job losses at the airline. Management of the carrier has prepared a strategy for saving up to €300 million. It comes as reports from Reuters say the company has managed to raise the necessary capital to keep flying for now. And the Group Finance Director at Royal Bank of Scotland has resigned after just 10 weeks in the job. Nathan Bostock had been promised that position after turning down another job at Lloyds 2 years ago. He's now set to join rival Santander as its Deputy Chief Executive after serving his 12-month notice period.
All right, finally, Stephen, a recession often brings with it some good value for those that can afford it. In Spain, there's one big investment opportunity on offer. What's that?
Possibly a bit too big for your or mine Christmas lists, but the airport at Ciudad Real, which is 200 kilometres south of Madrid, has gone up for auction. It cost €1 billion to build. It was supposed to be the country's first private international airport to serve tourists both travelling to the capital and also going to the Andalusia region. Now, after opening in 2008, the last flight took off from the airport in 2011, and its operator went bankrupt last year with debts of almost €300 million. The airport has become a sort of a symbol of the property crash in Spain. It's this ghost airport it's been referred to. It's now up for auction at a starting price of just €100 million, just a tenth of that original cost. A bit expensive for me, I think, but possibly a good investment for somebody out there.
Maybe a good Christmas present for someone as well. Thank you, Stephen Carroll. That was the business news. Now let's take a look at what's making headlines on the internet. We start off with more tributes being paid to Nelson Mandela.